very good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you find yourself. This is the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. My name is Sedley Adams, Head of Media, out of London, and moderating this event. Today is Monday, the 20th of June, 2022, and you are attending an event, either live or recorded, called Inspiring the Anti-Racist Generation. Your presenter today is Dr. Joseph Nwoye, who is the founder and president of SDIG. He'll be in conversation today with Jubanti Dhan, who is an advocate for peace, equity, and social justice, specialized in adult education, philosophies, and practices, and has worked in the field of law for most of her life. She has demonstrated her cross-cultural competencies as well as her commitment to diversity through her work as an inclusive leader, a community builder, and an equity, diversity, and inclusion advocate for social change. Jubanti is joined today by Karen Fleshman. Karen is head of a website called racyconversations.com. Details coming up soon. And she helps leaders to evolve their leadership style for the workplace today and the future. Karen says millennials and Gen Z aren't playing. If a workplace isn't healthy and equitable, they are out. So a very warm welcome to you from the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group technical team, Dr. Joseph Nwoye, our founder and president, who will be joining us in just a few moments, and to both of his guests, Jubanti Dhan and Karen Fleshman. There are some links on the screen for anybody that wishes to find out more about SDIG or the guests who are with Dr. Nwoye today. And in the meantime, I would like to hand over to your event moderator and presenter for today, Dr. Joseph Nwoye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adam. And of course, I want to send a special thank you and warmest regards to our guests, Jubanti Dhan and Karen Fleshman. And what I can say to you is that as we continue to work on the frontier to foster equity and social justice for all, you know that that's really the core of SDIG's existence. SDIG is an organization founded on the basis that everyone will be allowed to express his or her view, because we believe that most of the problems we have in this world stem from people's inability to either learn what they don't know, they're ignorant of, or that people marginalize them and feel like they shouldn't learn. As a result, we create unexpected problems. So our view at SDIG is to let people speak out. When people say that United States Congress is the most deliberating organization in the world, we are actually practicing it. I don't think that if you go to Congress, you see it happening. It doesn't. So in that, we have seen people who see what is happening, white racists pursuing people whose sexual orientation is different. They don't ask themselves why people will come to them and harass them for whatever their sexual orientation is. We see people who went to Buffalo targeting blacks, killing blacks. We see the one that happened in Pittsburgh, where they went to Jewish community and slaughtered people. Now, while all these things are going on, for me, I don't even see those people carrying out those things as being the primary people to target. I see those who hide under the media, under TV, under all kinds of prints to purport these terrible things that cultivate the habit of hate in those ignorant people. So when they do something, we say, oh, we don't know. Sure, we do know. There's a line that goes, that's not us. That's exactly us. That was a statement from American University president when he was addressing his students. If you don't like what you see or what you should be, or if you, instead of lying about it, face it on. We took people to the moon. We did all kinds of things in every field. And why can't we eradicate racism? It's because some people benefit from it. Some people sustain it, like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania legislator, whom if you go to the, just do simple research, go to Google, when he was saying, the votes for Pennsylvania, I fixed it for Romney. And you see this across the board, preventing people from voting. Where would we start? And that's why today, instead of focusing on the issue today, which is the Juneteenth, I feel like that's another celebration we are having. It's good. But does it do anything? In my opinion, I think people should be in arms because of atrocities that had gone on for how many years? For 400 plus, or 401 years to be exact, to eradicate that mess. We know what it is. But for the interest of remembering Juneteenth, because it's important, I will ask Karen to give us a brief description of what Juneteenth is. Oh, we can hear you.
Thank you. Apologies. I muted myself. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Joseph Nwoye. Did I say that correctly? Thank you. Yes. So today is the federal holiday of Juneteenth. This is the second year that it has been recognized as a federal holiday in the United States. Juneteenth is short for June 19th, 1865, and that is the date when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce that the Civil War was over and that enslaved people had been emancipated by the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed 2.5 years prior in 1862. But the slave-owning people of Texas had not informed the enslaved people that they were liberated. And so it wasn't until 2.5 years later that this news was widely disseminated in Texas, and finally enslaved people could leave their plantations and leave slavery. I just interviewed Tracy J., who is a 5th generation Black woman from Texas, about the origins of Juneteenth. And she said, even after this, there was so little communication in rural parts of the state that slavery continued. And then you think about the also the exception to the 13th Amendment about folks who had committed a crime. And in Texas, really the penal system, as in much of the South, it was another manifestation of slavery, as was sharecropping, et cetera, et cetera. So it has been a very meaningful holiday in Texas and much of the South, as well as in parts of the country like the Bay Area that many people moved to out of Texas to during the Great Migration. So, and now as of last year, it's recognized as a federal holiday. But as I speak with many Black activists about Juneteenth, there's mixed feelings about it becoming a federal holiday because, again, it feels like an appeasement in place of real substantive progress. And also, there's been a movement to commercialize the holiday on the part of many corporations to turn it into another Valentine's Day or Mother's Day as an opportunity to market products, as opposed to really memorialize the significance of Juneteenth and what it represents.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen. Let's go to Jubanti. I think I'm kind of reversing here. Let's get you to introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then, where you see your work going forward. Jubanti, could you take on that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for having me here. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone and to be part of this wonderful event. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. If we are joining from the other parts of the world, like South Asia or the Middle East, where it's evening time there. So my name is Jubanti Toppo, and I'm joining from Nova Scotia, Canada, which is originally known as the Mi'kmaq, or the land of the Mi'kmaq people, or the First Nation people of Canada. So I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from the land of the Mi'kmaq people. So as far as my professional background goes, I'm a social worker, an adult educator, and a leadership and community development professional with more than 10 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, working collaboratively with public and private sectors, nationally and internationally. So just to clarify, I'm not a lawyer, but I have worked with lawyers doing some legal work in terms of helping the legal profession incorporate an equity lens in all aspects of their work. So my recent experience, as I mentioned, includes working with barristers as the equity and access advisor, providing advice and guidance in terms of applying an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens in all aspects of the legal profession. I was also involved in supporting lawyers in their development of their policies and procedures, standards and regulations to best serve the public in the administration of law. So previously, I have worked on areas of gender-based violence, sexual violence, and achieving equity for women and all genders, predominantly working to address issues experienced by immigrants and refugees through settlement and integration efforts. So I've also worked in the area of mental health through one-on-one counseling, group and family support, through facilitation and workshops on various mental health related issues. And these experiences led me to represent Canada at the 63rd session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in New York in 2019. And subsequently, in 2021, I represented North America at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum for the Commission for Social Development. So what sort of propelled me to commit to this challenging work in the area of diversity and inclusive leadership is, I think, it was not a deliberate and planned out decision, but something that just happened to me as a result of my personal and professional experience and my experiences of working with diverse group of people who experience inequities in their everyday life in different settings. I constantly find myself in situations where I'm invited to advocate for people who are oppressed, suppressed, marginalized, and silenced due to the discriminatory structures in place. And I think this is the reason why I'm drawn to this kind of work as a way of supporting and empowering people find their voice. So I think this is a brief overview about myself. And thank you once again, Dr. Joseph.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You can see how innovative she is. People talk about being agile, you can see it right there. So thank you so much for that introduction. Now let's shift gear to Karen. Karen, as I said, she amazes me. Actually, I lifted her title and used part of it in this our presentation here. And just the one that I know, I wouldn't say I know too much, but the little I know, I see Karen as epitome of what we are working on. I say that not loosely. I mean it in the strongest terms possible. This is someone who I think she shares my view that if we want to address the issue of racism, all kinds of isms, first, we have to know what it means. Not the time where everybody jumps in and talks what he wants without even researching, knowing anything, which is very sad. But Karen comes across in a way that she applies what I know about psychology, sociology, and cultural grooming. She understood it. So when she says talking to the cousin, I do believe that fits into our narrative. Why I always say, if you come to SDIG, you're not just going to hear diversity or inclusion. You're going to see it. And I tell our members, look, if I don't see it, then we are not operating based on the grounding that I think propelled us to have this organization. So I want to see what people say to be consistent with what they do. And I also said that people we may try to avoid, it may actually be the people that will be our best messengers. That when they articulate their position, the people who may consider what we say as noise, will better see it because the people talking to them know them in and out. Whether it's covert behavior or overt behavior, which is epitomized by the person I cited in my book, who was 5 years old and saw some people who were beaten by heavy rain. And the dad opened the door and told them to come and stay in their living room. And as they were trying to get in there, the wife came and said, "What are you doing? What the hell are you doing? You want them to come and rape your daughter? You want them to do this? It was just unbelievable." And 5-year-old girl was hearing all these things. And that cumulatively shaped her into become a transformed individual. She's a very strong advocate for peace, equity, and social justice for all. That's to say that I see Karen as someone who is carrying the message to every place with courage and doing what some people will hide under the whatever, rather than confronting, and she does a great job in doing that. And that's essentially why I wanted her to come to this particular forum. So, Karen, would you please tell more about who you are, your job, how is your job doing the main job, and where do we go from here?
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And it's such an honor to be with you, Jubanti, and to learn more about you and your work. I am joining from the unceded territory of the Ohlone people, San Francisco, California. My company is called Racy Conversations. We are a workplace workshop facilitation company, and our mission is to inspire the anti-racist generation, hence the title for today's conversation. How I came to do this work. The early part of my career was in the immigrants' rights movement, and I moved to New York City to work on an initiative that helped 50,000 New Yorkers apply for their citizenship. And then in the post 9/11 economic downturn, we were defunded right around the time that reports came out that said 50% of Black men in New York City don't have a job. And we have almost 200,000 young adult New Yorkers, almost entirely Black and Latinx, who are not in school, not working. And coming from the immigrants' rights movement, this was very shocking because immigrants face a lot of adversity, but everybody's working. So why aren't the people who were born and raised in New York City also working? And I thought the answer to that question was job training, internships, connections to employers. And I immersed myself in the field of youth workforce development for 10 years, during which I became the mentor to many young adults of color as they began corporate careers. And that is when I really had to face my racism, because as I sat in conversation with my mentees, there were so many times when I realized I had harmful and inaccurate assumptions and stereotypes about them. And I also, as they were sharing their life stories, was so surprised at what they had experienced because it was so different from what I had experienced. It was learning about the racism that they were experiencing at these corporations that led me in 2014 to decide that I wanted to stop preparing young adults of color for the workplace and start preparing the workplace for young adults of color. And that is how I decided to create Racy Conversations. I'm also a part of a group called Moms Allyship Against Racism, where we're trying to educate moms about how to talk with our kids about racism, educate our kids about racism, role model anti-racism for our kids. And I am involved in activism here in my local community of San Francisco against police brutality and for racial justice in the community. And when I talk about inspiring the anti-racist generation, what does that mean? I believe that there has never been a generation of white Americans who stand as much to benefit from dismantling systemic racism as millennials and even more so Gen Z. And this is why I believe there's such an invested targeting of especially Gen Z's education. And you see all this movement on the right to ban the teaching of critical race theory, to ban books, to ban mentions of being gay, to ban trans people, et cetera, et cetera. They understand that the numbers are shifting. Here in the United States, 43% of millennials are people of color, 47% of Gen Z are people of color. In my son's age group, already children of color make up the majority. And my children, I mean, their level of awareness and anti-racism is so far advanced of mine. And I think that when children, when you provide education for children that allows them to contextualize what they see and to understand the history of what they see, the call to anti-racism is just so strong, they will not permit it. They will not permit racism to continue. And that's why I think the right is so deeply invested in preventing them from understanding that history and context, which I believe is a form of child abuse. Because like it or not, by 2040, this is going to be a majority people of color society. And so we need to prepare young people to understand and participate in a multiracial democracy. And it's so possible, you know, the amount of energy and lives and harm that we expend energy on could be used to bring us together and to learn from each other and to, you know, difference is the source of creativity. Difference is the source of innovation. So that is my life's work, is to try to, because I think, going to your question, why is racism so deeply entrenched, is because of self-interest, you know. And so trying to help white people see why and how it is in our self-interest to let go and to become part of a multiracial democracy is my life's work.
Dr. Nwoye, you just need to unmute for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Thank you, Karen, for that expression and showing us what it is. Sometimes I wish that people could learn. Horace Mann indicated that education is the best equalizer, and yet we have the so-called highly educated people who actually are part of the people pushing this garbage, whether it's stopping people from voting, which is at the core of our existence when we talk about democracy. And yet we go to tell other people how democracy is important. I think we should clean our house. Anybody that engages in voter suppression in any way should be banned from exercising that right, and certainly should not be allowed to vote. Unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer, so you guys are that you should be crafting something along that line, because I think that's the message people will get for those who are interested in sustaining what they know at deeper level is wrong. If you were not, because of time, I would have shared with you what representatives are doing in closed doors, saying it with pomposity, that this is what they're gonna do. But you know what I'm getting at. So thank you. Well, as I said, you guys are people I respect very dearly, and you are on the front line. If you look at what is happening now, you see people on extremes, both extremes, and the people at the middle usually are people who take cover. They don't have any courage. They can't do something. Quite frankly, for me, I prefer people on both extremes to those at the middle, because those that are at the middle are people who keep silent, which Dr. Martin Luther King spoke about. But you guys are actually on the other side pushing the envelope, and I love it. I say that because when I look at people who try to call spade a spade, they are often silenced, either by being killed or by other means. Those who perpetuate all this garbage try to use to sustain themselves in power. So what I'm getting at is to ask you the question: the structure of discriminatory practices, particularly on the basis of race, how it comes in various forms, overt, covert. We even see it in schools, where I see students writing me, telling me that in their school, they have teachers who make judgment about their students the first day of class. And some of these people are, some people are not prepared well. I have to give them that. But if they are not prepared well, is discipline them more, carrying the garbage they have outside based on the social cultural grooming that brainwash them to perceive certain people as couldn't do things they should do, and they use it against them. You go to health, it's the same thing. I was reading something that chronicling the type of things that will happen to people if Roe is overruled. You go to jobs. There was a book they titled Why Black People Are Staying Alone. And the way I say it is not black people. Everyone wants to be where he feels comfortable with people there. Like two of you, I'm very comfortable to be with you. More than some black people I don't know, or people who may come with a perspective that is not based on equity and social justice for all, because that's the core of who I am. And anything that deviates from that, you will see me there. So that's to say, we know structural racism. We know, you see how it permeates every aspect of our lives. Can you tell us a little about what you have uncovered on that and why it persists? And perhaps what you think could be done to tackle those things. Jubanti.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Joseph, for this question. And I think it is very timely in terms of what is happening around the world right now in terms of discrimination and discriminatory practices and racism that we see in a systemic level. I think to start with, I think organizations should base their diversity, equity, and inclusion work under the premise that in some way or the other, we are all racist, you know, and that our systems and structures are based on a colonial mindset. We should begin identifying the discriminatory practices in our policies and procedures as an organization, or within any structures, as a matter of fact. So it could be the education sector, the healthcare sector, or the employment sector. And start sort of identifying the issues and the gaps that exist within our structures, and start to incorporate a DEI lens in all aspects of our work. So for example, if we look at some of the organizations or companies, especially private companies, not necessarily private companies, it could be public sectors as well, in the hiring practices or in the performance and promotions or salary determinations and increment. So I think those are some of the structural and systemic way of using a colonial mindset in implementing some of the discriminatory practices that we intentionally or unintentionally or inadvertently sort of use them in our everyday work. Also, when we talk about hiring practices from a systemic point of view, I think having a diverse selection committee for hiring who are well trained in DEI is important, and a committee which represents not just sort of one diverse group, but various racialized population. And there are standards that human resource follow when it comes to hiring practices. And why I'm speaking about hiring practices is I think that is the first step in order to sort of eradicate the racism and the discriminatory practices, or to address diversity within organization. So the human resource must be well trained around diversity, equity, and inclusion, who works collaboratively with the selection committee and does not dictate the organization, because most human resource practices are standard practices. But when we talk about incorporating a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, it is much, much broader than mere human resource practices. And also, I think employers should take a proactive approach to diversifying their workforce. And this can be done by ongoing training and development for staff, their operations, and the various stakeholders that we work with. and creating a welcoming space for the diverse population even before they arrive into the organizations. And most importantly, I think organizations and individuals need to be prepared to listen and sort of understand the issues put forward by equity deserving individuals. So for example, if a racialized person has experienced discrimination or racism within an organization, and when they bring up issues to the governance or to their operations, they must listen to their issues with a genuine intention of addressing those issues, instead of being defensive or instead of trying to sort of cover up what exists within the organization when it comes to discriminatory practices. But accepting the fact that whether it is intentional, unintentional, or advertently or inadvertently, we maybe have discriminatory towards various population because our systems are very colonial in nature. So we need to understand that fact. And so I would say, I think listening is key, and listening to understand. And only then I think we can address the issues and address the complex issues of racism that exist in a systemic and structural level.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jubanti. Okay, this question, I want to pose it to both of you. So it's going to go first to Karen, then Jubanti, you would be asked to, respond to the same question. I have advanced the notion that people use diversity and inclusion interchangeably. And I've been in an environment where people latch onto diversity and they bring people in and get them out. Specifically, during summer, they bring people, mostly Black and Hispanic people, into school. And the people bringing them to school fully know that the people that are bringing to school aren't prepared for college material. And what happens is that at the end of the summer, all these folks are flunked out. And the so-called educated people manipulate data and provide, say, federal government Department of Education what they know is false. And then, in turn, they use that to give them money. And those people who come to them, say, people reading at 4th grade or 5th grade level because of poor education provided to them, and they know it wouldn't take a rocket scientist to know that these people cannot perform college work. They can't stand the rigor of college work. Therefore, the instructors do their job, flunk them out. It brings to the question why they use the data to support what they know they're not doing. So that's when I started thinking maybe we should begin to talk about the differentiation. Jamie Dimon, the president of J.C. Morgan Chase, was asked, or rather he hired Black people, brown people, and whatnot. And he was like bragging that he did this and did that. Guess what? All those people resigned at the same time. He said, I hired them, why did they leave? I'm like, really? Have you asked them? And be honest so that they can tell you the truth? He didn't. I read it in Bloomsburg magazine, and I'm like, it made me to write a small piece that people really responded to very much. So with that, I think it's important that those of you who are leaders will be able to describe the difference between this word they use and confuse leaders, diversity and inclusion. At the end, they end up doing nothing, or sometimes do the opposite of what they purport to be doing. So, Karen, would you distinguish that and perhaps tell us how you think you're gonna infuse both to make it meaningful for leaders.
Yes. So diversity is about representation. It's about numbers and different groups being represented within the workplace. And it should not just be at the lowest level of the hierarchy, but at all levels of the organization need to become more diverse. Inclusion is the sense of belonging. It's the sense of the organization, first of all, preparing so that as there is greater representation, there is understanding of how to interact across difference, how to respect and follow the leadership of people who are underrepresented in the workplace, and how not to undermine them by microaggression or other ways of impeding their leadership, but to really follow their leadership and to create an organization that thrives. Um, Going back to the prior question as well, I think we have to understand that racism and capitalism are inextricably linked, and racialized capitalism is at the foundation of the United States economy, of the global economy. When going back to Juneteenth, at the point of emancipation, enslaved people's valuation as an asset was $3 billion, greater than all the other assets of the United States combined. That literally enslaved people's labor and the theft of Native people's land is the engine that has driven the United States economy to become the most prosperous, the most wealthy, the most powerful country on earth. And so when you think about today, there is still a strong link between racism and capitalism. There's still a strong link between racism and profit. Going back to Jamie Dimon, you think about JP Morgan's role in the subprime mortgage lending that caused the 2008 economic downturn, that caused the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap in our country to expand. And now we are on the trajectory of median Black net wealth being zero by 2053. So we have seen consistently a pattern that the government does things like what you were just describing at the university level. I used to be a big proponent of college education for everybody until I realized that college is just another system designed to serve the adults who work for it at the expense often of the young people who go to it, particularly if they are Black or brown. And then these corporate work environments that are extremely harmful to people of color's mental health and well-being. So what gives me hope and what I see the future is looking like is that in the United States, you have this mass movement to unionize. Just this past week, workers in an Apple store decided to unionize. Workers at Starbucks are unionizing. Workers at an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island unionized. I really do believe that that is the only lever of accountability to make corporations take both diversity and inclusion seriously. Because under our current laws, discrimination is banned, workplace harm is banned, sexual harassment is banned, but it is pervasive and goes on and on and on. without that level, and no one is holding them to account for it. So I do believe that the accountability is going to come from the grassroots up.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Jubanti, please.
I would just like to echo what Karen just shared. I think it is very important for us to understand that racism is tied to capitalism, and it is important for us to understand the hierarchy that exists even within the different structures, and how we should hold the leaders accountable from the top down at a national level to a regional level and to the municipal level. And so thank you, Karen, for sharing that and giving us some context in terms of where it starts and how it sort of ripple downs from top to the bottom. I think from my perspective, I think diversity and inclusion are two sides of the same coin when it comes to achieving a value-based action and addressing issues of racism and discrimination. As the saying goes, diversity is a fact. We are all diverse, we are all different, and inclusion is an act. So it is calling for a value-based action. So we know that we are diverse, we know that we are different. So what do we do about it? So by the virtue of being human, I think we are all diverse and come from diverse backgrounds, with various knowledge, with various skills and attributes. And in the present day, especially for a diverse nation like the United States or Canada or the UK or Australia and all the different Western countries, where diversity is our strength, I think we must learn to nurture our strength and use it to better ourselves as an organization within our various work settings and at a community level in general. And this can only be achieved by our genuine efforts and willingness to include and integrate the people who look different from ourselves. Because the next steps after diversity and inclusion is integration. And if we don't understand the integration aspect of diversity and inclusion, we may end up in issues like what Karen just mentioned about microaggression, where people, when they find themselves in a situation where very few or nobody looks like them, they are treated like as if they are doing favor to them and they are treated like an outsider. So I think as we are trying to achieve diversity and inclusion, we must also try to simultaneously think about how to integrate, how to make friends, how to understand each other and how to learn about each other. So I think that is how I would frame diversity, inclusion, and integration in one circle.
Okay, Dr. Nwoye, just unmute yourself for me, please.
Audience, could you please ask your question, if you have any, to these distinguished guests?
Hi, this is Sadly from the studio in London. We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment, but we are just about to unmute the audience so that they can join in by audio should they wish to do so. So just give us a couple of seconds.
Okay. Well, while he's doing that, if we don't get questions, I know that you guys have a lot to offer. Whoever listens, the key is are people listening, and that would be very helpful. In order to frame it, you guys already done an excellent job here, but I just, for the purposes of looking at it and taking away, if you were to say, be called to provide leadership in context of the fact that we know what the situation is. How would you advise any leader of your choice, whether Security Council, United Nations Security Council General, asks you to give him an idea of what could be done to tackle this really thorny issue? It could be your president, could be your governor, could be your police chief, could be your school administrator, because the problem is systemic. It has permeated into our society because of our division, what I call artificial wall in my last work. And those artificial walls that are there, you may say we don't see them. It means that people develop comfort zones where they talk whatever they want to talk about when the other people they're talking against are not hearing them. So what policy would you advance to help leaders meaningfully tackle this problem? Okay, you can choose. Whoever wants to begin can begin. Okay, Jubanti, I think Karen is prompting you to begin. Do you want to go?
Sure. I think that's a very big question, and asking leaders in terms of what approach they can take. And based on my experience working with the legal profession who are actively involved in terms of making policies and procedures for governance, I would advise them to take a restorative approach. I think in the process of achieving so much, we have forgotten the very essence of our existence, that we are all humans and we need to nurture our relationships as human, because we are all interdependent on each other and we need each other. We need to understand each other. We need to care for each other. So basing our premise, our principle of being human, my advice would be to take a restorative approach by placing values at the forefront, the values of love, the values of forgiveness, the values of caring, being kind, all of the values that we can find at the forefront of what we do. So I would advise them to take a restorative approach. How can we create a world? How can we create an environment where we can understand each other, where we can love more, where we can forgive more, in building inclusive cultures, and bolstering social equity? So basically asking them to take responsibility and reminding ourselves and reminding our leaders to take responsibility, to hold ourselves accountable of being human and the very essence of why we are here, and what the purpose of our existence is. So also when we talk about the issues of racism and discrimination, I would genuinely ask them to be apologetic for the various systems in place and actively looking to revamp and dismantle the systems by putting in the values as human beings first before anything else.
Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. So Karen, back to you.
Wow, that was a beautiful answer, Jubanti. And very similarly, I would say don't look to me for advice on how to end racism, but look to Native people, look to Black people. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I think that we need in the United States as well as globally a truth and reconciliation process. When you think about, I've heard Brian Stevenson speak about this. At the end of the Holocaust, Germany put the Nazis on trial, convicted them, paid reparations. And today in Germany, there is not a single statue of a Nazi anywhere. There's not a single textbook that says Nazism wasn't that bad or anything. It is very clear. The historical record is clear. We did not do that in the United States at the end of the Civil War. Instead, it was, oh, let's let bygones be bygones. And then white women organized and got textbooks written saying, oh, slavery hadn't been that bad. And they organized and they got statues of Confederate soldiers put up in different places. And the Ku Klux Klan formed and it expanded nationwide. And then it was the kind of belief system got integrated into media, advertising, every aspect of our society. So it's no wonder that we are in this racism that we are in today. That's where it originated from. We've never sat down as a society and said racism is wrong, slavery was wrong, and held the people to account for doing that. And I really do believe that the answer lies in returning the land to Native people, and turning to Native people for leadership. They are the ones who originated restorative justice. You know, they know how to think about holding people to account in community, restoring the person who was harmed, and making decisions factoring in 7 generations into the future. And I really do believe that all of the challenges we face right now with global warming and just all the wealth accumulating up into the hands of 1% and police brutality, all of it is interrelated. And I believe that if we follow the leadership of Native people, of Black people, we can find the solutions to all of these challenges. And we can create a society where everyone, including white people, will honestly thrive. Because even white people, you know, white life expectancy is decreasing in the United States, and it's decreasing due to alcoholism, overdose, suicide, lack of access to health care. So you know, white people are definitely being harmed by the system of white supremacy as well.
Wow. You guys are great. Thank you so much. I mean, you guys are just wonderful. I appreciate it. And now I think we've come to the end of this program. And, this is the information you provided here. I think, again, when we talk about listening, I wish all the people who purport to be leaders and try to build a better world. Because from my perspective, being a leader, you're gonna be leader for all, not leader for some. And if they will listen to you and take your advice, your pointers, I think that they would help facilitate the process of creating a better world. A world in which all these problems are really minute, because the problem can be solved. The issue is that the division, say for instance, we see in politics, one party will sabotage the other person, even when they're trying to do something that is good, and the other person will do the same thing. And at the end, the ordinary people will suffer. Where I came from, there's a saying that goes, when elephants fight, the grass suffers. That's exactly what is happening. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for the audience that came. It seems like Mr. Adam is raising his hand. Mr. Adam, go.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nwoye. This is Sedley in London. We have a question here from Robert Robinson, who says, I cite the examples of our speakers, universities, economics, capitalism, etc. How do we go about bringing these changes in with so much resistance to a multicultural society? And that's the question from Robert Robinson.
Thank you for the question, Robinson. So our guest, you want to tackle that?
I think it is, as I mentioned, the pressure for change is never going to come from the people who the current system benefits. It's always going to come from the grassroots. And I was so inspired by the Amazon workers who organized in the warehouse in Staten Island. And they said how they did it was by baked ziti. I don't know if you're familiar. Baked ziti is like it's almost like a lasagna, but like getting people together to break bread together and start to get to know each other. And then we can see how we may be very different in terms of our skin color, lived experience, etc. But when we are working in the same system at the same level, we share a lot of common interests. And the capitalists' um, main strategy to prevent us from uniting is to treat some of us as slightly better than the others, and then we start to pull apart from each other. So I think the greatest way to exert pressure for change is to unite people across difference and help them to see the common humanity and the shared interests across difference so we can organize together and put pressure for change.
Thank you so much. Jubanti, do you want to add something to this? This is amazing.
Yeah, surely. I think it is a very difficult task, to work in a multicultural society, especially when there is so much resistance. And I think part of the reason for the resistance is lack of understanding, I think. And I think the key is, I think we should start talking to each other. We should start like what the SDIG is doing right now. I really appreciate the values of the SDIG, which is respect, open communication, and equality, where you are creating an environment where we are able to respect each other, listen to each other, talk to each other, understand each other through this open dialogue. So I think that is very important. And it is a very slow process. I am speaking from my experience in terms of working in this field for a long time. My sort of advice would be to have patience. It is a difficult task, but to appreciate ourselves in terms of the work that we do, and have that patience. And like as Karen pointed out, to unite the people. In the process of doing this work, many times unintentionally, we tend to create this lateral violence among ourselves, among the people of color ourselves, without even knowing that we are all sort of aiming for the same goal. So I think we need to unite ourselves. We need to work together. We need to create more spaces like this where we can speak openly and try to understand each other to bring about the change. I would also like to point out this book by Mary C. Gentile, Giving Voice to Values. I found this book very useful, and I think you will find it valuable too. So it's by Mary C. Gentile, and it's the title is Giving Voice to Values.
Giving voice to value. All right. Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're the champion. I love the way you've articulated your position. Sometimes people say, well, they went to something was that like lecture, but you kind of broke it down. That anybody who listened will see something that they can take away and make dramatic difference in whichever place they are. I happen to believe that we as individuals should take responsibility to foster issues of peace, equity, and social justice. And of course, as a community, it will make us better. Our work will be much more rapid in expanding and getting to do things, just as you articulated, talking to one another. And unfortunately, that's a hard one, because we have a society. Quite frankly, if you lived where I was brought up, you can see neighbors here who don't even talk to their neighbor or know their neighbor at all. That's like no. But again, it's cultural. So I want to thank you so much. And if you have any other thing you want to comment on, essentially, I think I'm done. Or if you want to have some summary to do, then you can go ahead and do it. But otherwise, I think you guys will be phenomenal.
I would like to thank you, Jubanti. It was such an honor to share the stage with you and learn from you. And thank you, Dr. Joseph, for creating this space and for having the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion group on LinkedIn. I learned so much from the posts on there. If people want to follow my work, I can, LinkedIn is my main social media. It's Karen Fleshman, and Racy Conversations is my company. On Thursdays, I host a weekly LinkedIn Live, Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. So if you're interested in that topic, I encourage you to join us. It's at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, US, on Thursdays. And yes, let's keep working together toward a future where everyone thrives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Jubanti, you have something else to add?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure to meet Karen Fleshman, and also the feeling is mutual. Yeah, I learned a great deal from you, and being in the legal field for a long time, it was an honor and a pleasure to, of course, share the stage with you. So thank you, Dr. Joseph, for creating this space. So currently I am working as a consultant, mostly doing volunteer work, working with various nonprofit organizations and also in the public sector. So doing sessions and workshops and trainings on topics such as inclusive leadership, power and privilege, unconscious bias, and unity in diversity. So that is what I'm doing currently. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if I can be a support to you as an organization or as individuals. So thank you once again, Dr. Joseph, for having us.
Thank you, ladies. I'm so pleased that you guys have given it to them. I hope they listen and that they take it to their various corners and begin to foster this different way we hope would come. Thank you.
Thank you.